Good morning, Chairman Cicilline, Ranking Member Buck, members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in these hearings. My name is Glenn Greenwald, and the work I have been doing for the last 25 years, first for a decade or so as a constitutional lawyer, and then for the last 15 years as a journalist, somebody who has done much investigative reporting that has provoked the ire of many governments around the world, who has co-founded a media outlet in 2013 and helped to grow it through 2020 in this very difficult climate. And as a co-founder of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, devoted to defending the rights of journalists to be free of government retaliation, I have a really passionate and deep and long-standing interest in the issues before this committee. I think as well that this subcommittee has done some of the most important work, particularly with the October report, in documenting the serious menace that Silicon Valley monopoly power has, not just for our political life, but for the flow of information and increasingly other sectors of our life. And I certainly agree with everyone who has spoken before me about the serious problem of particularly local news outlets failing as a result of their inability to find a financial model to sustain themselves in this climate. I nonetheless do have concerns about the proposed solution pending before the subcommittee. If you look at the last 5 or 6 months, I believe strongly that the problem of Silicon Valley use of their monopoly power to interfere in and control our political has worsened quite severely. Three incidents in particular that I define and describe in my opening statement, one being what Congressman Jordan referred to as the censorship of what turned out to be completely accurate reporting based on authentic and genuine documents broken by the New York Post, the nation's oldest newspaper, about the front-running presidential candidate in the weeks leading up to the election by Twitter simply banning any discussion of that story and locking that newspaper out of its account unless they agreed to delete all references to their own reporting, and Facebook algorithmically suppressing the ability for that story to spread was an extremely disturbing example of the ability of tech giants to interfere in our elections. The same took place with the removal of the sitting president of the United States, which, although supported by many in the United States, was condemned by world leaders, including many who had a very adversarial relationship with President Trump, Chancellor Merkel in Germany, the president of Mexico, French and EU officials, on the grounds that tech giants are posing a threat not just to American democracy, but to world democracy. The concern that I have is that often we talk about the relationship between journalists and the media industry on the one hand and tech giants on the other as a predator-prey relationship where the tech giants are the predators and the news industry is the prey. But oftentimes that's not the case. If you look at the most serious and disturbing instances of tech censorship over the past 6 to 12 months, one would expect, based on the traditional model of news media, to uphold the values that Chairman Cicilline referred to as a free and diverse press, to condemn and oppose that kind of censorship, and yet the opposite happened. Oftentimes, the journalists were not only supporters of it after the fact, but leading proponents of it beforehand, pressuring these tech companies to censor and to silence ideologies with which they disagree or competitors to these organizations. I'm concerned in particular that by empowering a news media that believes not necessarily any longer in a free and diverse press, but in ideological homogeneity, that they can use this new power to impose these values of censorship, of silencing news outlets with which they disagree in the name of quality control. And I'm particularly worried that we have a news media that is becoming itself increasingly concentrated, where the New York Times is essentially becoming like the Amazon of journalism. This subcommittee issued a report filled with extremely promising and I think important solutions to the problem of monopolistic power. And I'm concerned that if the subcommittee instead starts taking a piecemeal approach to appease and aggrandize the most powerful industries like journalists, it could forestall the opportunity to get to the root of the problem that is concerning people across the ideological spectrum, which is the need to apply antitrust laws to these growing monopolies, not in a case-by-case basis, but overall. So I hope the committee stays focused on its outstanding report that it issued. And thanks again for the opportunity.